Hello everybody, welcome to another video. I am absolutely chuffed to bits because finally, after, I think it's 7 years since I got into the top 10k, I've finally managed to get back there again. It's my 7th top 10k finish. Absolutely over the moon. Last 3 seasons I've been top 100k. And finally I've just managed to go that extra mile and just get in there. But yeah, absolutely over the moon, because top 10k finish in this current era of Fantasy Premier League is ridiculously hard to achieve. So anyone else who managed to achieve it as well, give yourselves a pat on the back, because it's just so hard now, with the sheer amount of active managers we have now, and also the content creation, which I've always maintained, really does make the game more difficult to do well in, because it's just, it levels the playing field, because, and it's why, so many teams are so similar. And, we've got 7 or 8 players who are just pretty much identical. At the end of the day, everyone has access to the same players, the same chips. So you have to try and find ways somewhere to find an edge. And that's incredibly hard to do when people's teams are so similar. So, but yeah, so I was 8.7k going into that last game week. So it was always going to be touch and go. It was always going to be tense and stressful, 1 or 2 events that could go the wrong way for me, and that would have been it. But first thing I'll say is what a surreal final day of the season it was. That first half, absolutely nothing of any significance happened at all in that first half, apart from, so I think the only things that happened with any kind of relevant players were Buemo scored and Bowen got an assist, but because they're so high owned, not really that significant really. And then even 20 minutes into the second half, there was still there's not really anything happening. But for me, yes, my players weren't really doing anything, but because my main, so that there was 4 threats to me who I was kind of, really anxious about. So those 4 players were Konza, Rodgers, Ivan Nielsen and Saka. But so of course none of them had done anything either in that first half. They didn't do anything at all the whole game. But yeah, because we had that kind of situation, there was just nothing. There was no change. I don't even know my rank. I'm guessing was still about the same with 25 minutes to go. But then came the stress. So the first event that happened was, I've got Dan Burn in my team. Newcastle lost the clean sheet. I looked at live FPL and that took me out of the top 10k. Took me down to 10,400 or something like that. And there wasn't that long left in the games, and I was watching the Liverpool game, and I was following the other games on flash scores. Now, anyone else that uses flash scores will know that they have this thing where it will flash up big chance next to the team. 90% of the time that happens, it means there's a goal coming. So I've dropped out of the top 10k provisionally. I then see big chance for Bournemouth and Arsenal, and I'm thinking, oh my God, please don't let this be Ivan Nielsen or Saka, because that's going to be it. That's top 10k dreams over. I looked at the Bournemouth goal. Goal goes in. Oh, it's Semenyo. Okay, at least it's not Ivan Nielsen. And then the Arsenal goal goes in, and it's Saka, and I just thought, oh my God, that's it, over. And then at 30 seconds later, it's back to 1-1. Oh, it's been disallowed. Right, okay. Still, maybe it's not quite over yet, but I still needed something to go in my favour, because there was only about 15 minutes or so left. And then Man United scored. So Konsa lost his clean sheet. that took me just inside. I looked at live FPL and I was back, but again, only just inside the top 10k. And then Salah scored. He's my captain. I know he was most people's captain, but I think his EO was 160% or something. So that meant there was still some gain to be had from him scoring, and that put me back up. That put me up to about, I don't know, 8.2k. But it's still quite close. So I carried on watching the Liverpool game, and I didn't even look at flash scores. I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for all the games to finish, and then I'm going to anxiously look at the final scores. So I did that, and some of the games were going on for ages, because on flash scores if there's any red numbers, that means that there's still games being played. So finally it finished. I go into the scores and I see that Arsenal and Bournemouth have both scored, and I'm like, oh my God, don't let this be any of those players. And I look at the goals, and it's Semenyo, not even Nielsen, and Saka didn't score. I was like, oh my God. So that's it. I finished 8.2k, I think. So yeah, just over the moon. And for the first time, so in 19 years of playing, only once have I had a green arrow on the final game of the season, and I finished. I don't know why that is. It's just ridiculous. It just seems that going over I won't go into all the players I've picked, but I've always looked to pick a high upside, lowly owned player who's got high potential just for that last game of the season. I think most of us do that because, you can really, it's a final chance at one last swing, one last roll of the dice, because you don't need to obviously worry about them being in your team after that game because it's the final game of the season. But it just never works for me. And funnily enough, my final transfer kind of punty pick failed yet again. But fortunately, I still got enough from the rest of my team, and with the other threat players not doing anything, it was fine. It was so I'd narrowed my transfer decisions down to either Semenyo or Barnes, and of course I went with the wrong one yet again. Semenyo got 2 goals, Barnes did nothing, but it's fine. It didn't matter. I still got my top 10k finish. But how I thought Barnes was an absolutely fantastic pick, because a motivated Newcastle team going for Champions League, playing against an Everton team with nothing to play for and without their 2 main centre-backs. How on earth have Newcastle lost that game and not even scored? It's absolutely incredible. Even Roy Keane was saying at I was watching, I think it was the Liverpool game at the start, but he was saying, I really worry about Everton today. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, let's hope there is need to worry about them. Let's hope Barnes, because I also had Isak in my team, don't forget as well. So, he was quite heavily sold. But yeah, for both of them to blank in a game like that is just unbelievable. And that actually brings me on to, there was just a point I wanted to raise really, and there's been a lot of over these last few game weeks, there's a lot of kind of talk going around about, let's target the teams with nothing to play for. Let's look at bringing in players from teams that are motivated, have got Champions League to play for, whatever. And the events over the last few weeks has led me to conclude that it doesn't mean anything at all, because let's look at some of the games that have happened. So if we go back to, I think it was game week 36, and Villa were playing Spurs. Spurs were 5 days away from the biggest game for 20 years or however long it's been since they last won a trophy. Villa, motivated, going for Champions League. Everyone assumed that they were absolutely going to thrash Spurs. We all brought Watkins in and captained him, including myself. And I watched that game, And Villa were absolutely shit. Yes, they won the game 2-0, but they hardly created anything. Spurs, for the most part, nullified them quite easily. And Villa they needed a set piece goal in the second half to break the deadlock. It was just, Watkins never looked like scoring. And on the same night, you've got Man United, who are in a similar boat with that cup final looming. And Chelsea, another Champions League chasing team, only beat them 1-0. So again, not that convincing. And then if you look at the games on Sunday, Villa again playing a Man United team whose morale must have been, as low as it can possibly be after having just lost the Europa League final and having such a poor season in the league. Again, we're assuming Villa are going to win that game. Now, I appreciate they had a man sent off, and yes, they were hard done by that Rodgers goal not being allowed. But if you look at the stats, Man United were the better team. Villa had one shot on target, and then of course there's the Newcastle game, which I've already talked about. How can Newcastle not even score in that game? It's just bizarre. So I feel like there's a bit of a learning point to be taken out of that. When it comes to Liverpool, yes, Liverpool, they did massively drop off since clinching the league. But in fairness, I actually think Liverpool have been very average for a long time, even before they clinched the title. And it's a little bit different for the team who wins the league because they can't physically get any higher than first, whereas other teams have got, they want to finish as high as possible. But yeah, so for me, I just think the conclusion I've come to is that I don't think you can read too much into this whole thing about teams on the beach, teams motivated, teams that have got something to play for, because I think at the end of the day, whatever teams are picked, even if it's a rotated team, they are Premier League level footballers who I guess have always got something to play for, whether it's just pride in performance or just trying to finish as high as possible in the table. So yeah, that's just something I thought was an interesting point to make. That's maybe something of use for going into next season. But you know what? I absolutely can't wait for next season now, which is in contrast to how I've felt over the last few years. Because yes, I've got top 100k finishes, which is still good. They are still good seasons, but not really what my aim is. My aim is always top 10k, and I've finished those seasons feeling quite unsatisfied and actually quite happy to have a break from FPL. And even there's been some years when I've actually really considered whether or not I should keep playing the game at all, because the amount of time you put into it and what you actually get out of it. But this time, I absolutely can't wait for next season. I'm chomping at the bit. It's hard now because I don't know about everyone else, but you always get that kind of anti-climax feeling when the final game week's finished, all the tables have been calculated, and it's always, for me, is particularly worse when there's no international football tournaments to look forward to, because they at least provide something, tides us over, we get into the international football, but there's nothing this summer. There's no Olympics, no World Cup, no Euros. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Almost 3 months of no FPL. That's it's going to be hard. But yeah, I'm made up with how things have finished for me. Top 10k, 7th of my career. So yeah, that's it for me for now. I'll see you next time.